All right, let's just get started. Today we have a special guest, as I had indicated on Wednesday. This is Mr. Jeff Apregan. I'm going to let you hear what he has to say about the business from his perspective. I would like you guys, while he's speaking, to be formulating questions. We're videotaping this conversation. I'd like you to think critically, to form some questions, to take this opportunity to have a conversation with somebody who is engaged in the business in a practical way, and at a level that you all hope to attain someday. So let's focus on what's going on, engage, and I give you Jeff Apregan.
Great. Thanks. Appreciate you guys letting me come today. This is the kind of thing that I enjoy doing. I don't really get to do it as often as I'd like to. I'll tell you, and I understand this is kind of an introductory course, so it's one of the first courses that you have when you start the program here. My experience is based almost entirely on the live side of the industry. So it's live shows, concerts, tours, festivals, all that kind of stuff. So I was talking to someone yesterday, John Paul picked me up yesterday, and I was trying to explain what my business does right now, and I was thinking about the 30-second elevator pitch when you're in an elevator and you got 30 seconds to explain to someone what you do. And I did an awful job of it. So what I thought I would do is kind of rewind back to how I got started and the different experiences, and then it'll kind of better set up what my business is today. Long time ago, I was a college student like you guys were, actively engaged in doing shows on campus, you know, whether it was lectures, movies, concerts, whatever it was, we were doing all that kind of stuff, and I was going to college in Fresno, California. And it wasn't a music business program. What we really had was just kind of a programming committee. So we were the kids that booked the concert series and did all that kind of stuff. And you know, it was during that time that I formulated the idea that I really wanted to get into the live side of the business. And as I got out of college, I really thought initially that I wanted to be an agent. And I was trying to get into William Morris in Los Angeles and get, you know, that highly coveted mailroom position. This would have been in 1979, long time ago. And at that time, just to kind of put things in perspective, someone in the mailroom made $150 a week. And the way that the mailroom program worked, and it's, you know, William Morris, as you will learn or you're already learning, is certainly one of the largest talent agencies in the world, not just in concerts, but, you know, actors, you know, screenwriters, name it, any aspect of the entertainment business. But in those days, someone starting in the mailroom would work in the mailroom, would eventually graduate to a position where they became a messenger. And a messenger is just someone that's driving all over LA, delivering scripts, delivering cans of film, getting things signed, delivering mail, whatever anyone tells you to do. And then from there, the next progression would be to become basically a personal assistant, which is like a secretary, someone that's answering the phones, working directly for an agent. And at that point in time, attaching yourself to that agent and, you know, hopefully finding someone that's going to take you under their wing and help mentor you and bring you along. And then one day, hopefully, if everything goes right, the stars and the moon, everything aligns, you become an agent. That was the path that I thought I would be on. I interviewed 3 times, 3 different interviews to get a job in the mailroom, and I never, ever got the job. So what I ended up doing, fortunately, is I ended up getting a job with a company called Concerts West. And Concerts West, in that day, was arguably the largest concert promoter in the world. And what made that company unique is that they were managing artists and they were also the promoter for those artists. So 2 very distinctly different roles. And they really had a model for a national tour promoter that didn't exist at that time. And you know, 30, 40 years ago, you know, there were these rock concert promoters that were guys that had been in their markets. The guy in Philly was Larry Maggot. The guy in Boston was Don Law. San Francisco was Bill Graham. You've heard some of these names, or you'll learn about them. And the model for this company was very different. They didn't work with any of those guys. If John Denver, who is an artist that they managed, went on tour, they would actually promote John Denver's concerts in every one of those cities. So I was fortunate enough to get a part-time job working in the accounting department and just kind of flying low under the radar. And one of the first jobs I had was going through all these show files that had come back from all the concerts that had been on the road with the Eagles Long Run Tour and Bad Company Tour and some of the big tours that had happened in the late 70s. And these these were days where acts were selling 2-3 nights out in arenas, big money at the time. But the advantage I had was being in the accounting department, I was looking at these show settlement sheets, so I could start to understand how shows made money, where they sold tickets, what the expenses looked like, what kind of money you could make, and how the tickets were priced, and all those different aspects. I stuck around long enough to kind of get friendly with some people who started to look out for me, and then I ended up getting a full-time position. And the first tour that I ever went out on, I think was in 1980, was with Bob Dylan, who was also a management client. So in that role, I was a promoter rep, and I stayed with that company for 3 years. So they managed Bob Dylan, John Denver, the Moody Blues, Neil Diamond, the Beach Boys. They had a huge roster of acts. And you know, as a young promoter rep, I would work on the tours, setting them up ahead of time, and then I'd go out on the road and I'd do the tours. So in those early years, I toured with John. Dylan was the first tour that I did. A little bit of Beach Boys. I did a Blues Brothers tour in 1981, the only tour they actually did. There were others in that time, but in '82, I did my first Neil Diamond tour, and that was really a very fortunate business relationship that started very early on. So as I moved out of that company, I went to work for another company which had acquired, which ran an amphitheater in Southern California, and acquired a 50% share of a concert company in Southern California. And this was a company that was doing not tours, but in their region, they were doing maybe 300-400 shows a year. So again, I was kind of walking in as a relatively young guy with business experience in the live entertainment side. And that's kind of become my niche as I've gone through my career, is that I've, you know, it's hokey, but I always say I'm a business guy in a creative environment. So, you know, very important that at the end of the day, it is still a business. It doesn't matter who's playing, doesn't matter what they're playing, doesn't matter how hot they're going to be or how long they're going to be hot. Someone's got to be minding the store. And, you know, over the course of time, that's been kind of the common thread for me. So in those years, I ran the amphitheater, and then I also worked for the concert promotion company. So one night I'd be a venue operator, another night I'd be settling the show, you know, sitting across from the tour accountant from Journey or Rod Stewart or whoever it was that we were doing at the time. I stayed with that company for about 11 years. We started buying radio stations, and I started running radio stations. And throughout this entire time, though, I had always stayed close to the Neil Diamond camp, and I was always involved in Neil's tours, almost every tour. There were a few exceptions over the years, and whether I was doing entire tours or whether I was just doing, you know, maybe the West Coast or, you know, these 12 shows, whatever it happened to be. And then in '93, I started my own business, and I was very fortunate that the Neil Diamond relationship came with me. So I continued to be involved in all of Neil's touring, everything in North America from really 1998 on. But what made it different was that it was this time, for the first time, it was my own business. I was working for myself. So it's been a very fortunate relationship. So with Neil, I've had lots and lots of experiences of routing tours, picking the cities, negotiating the deals with the venues, coordinating the on sales. And we'll come back to this stuff. If any of you have questions about what any of this means, just ask me in a few minutes. I'm trying to do it chronologically, make sure I'm not leaving anything out. So that's, you know, so we've been very active in tours, and certainly routing tours and doing all the things I just mentioned. My business today really, there's two parts to my business. One is that we are, and it really is kind of a niche business. So it's not really a completely traditional kind of a role that we have. It's just something that we've managed to find for ourselves. But we consult arenas, and we also consult NFL stadiums as really kind of a talent advisor. So we have a group of 9 NFL stadiums that we consult, and in that role, we are, you know, we're helping to identify really a handful of acts that are going to play stadiums in any given year. Very small number to begin with, but we're helping them negotiate the right kind of deals. We're helping them do the things that are going to help them get that show, keep the show, and actually buy the show. So in the case of the stadiums, in many cases, the stadiums are actually becoming promoters, and they need a skill set to do that, to evaluate the risk and to make sure that, you know, things go the way they're supposed to go. We also have a business we started called Venue Coalition, which consults arenas, and basically it's very similar. And the reason that these businesses exist is that there are more venues in the arena spectrum than there are acts that can fill them, okay? So you take any major city and you drive 60, 80 miles around it, there's probably another arena somewhere. And There's probably an Indian casino that's booking talent. There's probably a fair, an amphitheater. So the venues make money when people walk through the doors and they buy beer and buy popcorn and pay for parking and pay for this and pay for that. People aren't walking through the doors, they're not making any money. So out of necessity, the venues are having to become promoters more and more. And you know, there are promoters everywhere, but of course the two major promoters that you hear about are Live Nation and AEG, because they're doing things, they're really doing a large volume of shows. But they are typically pulling away from these smaller markets, and the smaller markets are having to kind of figure it out for themselves. So that's where we come in. We come in and we'll actually get involved with the agents and maybe some independent promoters and the acts, and we'll try and fill some dates. So we buy a lot of talent. We probably buy, I don't know, I'm guessing maybe $10 million a year in talent. And that's everything from Weird Al Yankovic to the Eagles, everything in between. A lot of classic rock stuff, a lot of country stuff. So that's pretty much what our business does. Now, we also get involved in special projects. A few years ago, we did all the routing for Van Halen. It was kind of a unique situation. They didn't have an agent. They didn't need an agent. They had already sold the tour off to Live Nation. But yet, management for Van Halen really wanted control over the routing, and they asked us to get involved in that, and we did that for them. We get involved in, a couple years ago in 2009, AEG Television, they've got a big television department a lot of people don't even know about, was going to all the summer festivals and capturing footage, the Lollapaloozas and the Austin City Limits and Coachellas, and of course. And they were trying to, they were capturing footage and trying to monetize it, but literally every 2 weeks there was 100 people jumping on a plane to go produce a festival that they didn't have a way to monetize. And the meter was spinning, and they were spending so much money, and some of the festivals they were filming in 3D, which is incredibly expensive. So our role was really to help them with all of the business parts. Not particularly glamorous, but you know, someone does have to deal with insurance, and someone does have to deal with budgets, and things were moving so fast that you could literally burn through millions of dollars and not even have your arms around it until it's over and done and too late. And then of course you have to get the artist clearances to use the footage that you're spending all this money to shoot. So those are just examples. We buy a lot of talent. We do corporate events. We do one-off things for corporate clients. We were doing a lot for Motorola at one point in time, and Motorola was doing these shows in very exotic parts of the world where they would bring in big clients and they needed big names to impress them. So that's kind of the broad spectrum of what we do. So the venue consulting is really kind of a niche. Talent buying is a big part of what we do. We love doing it. We have a theater in Bakersfield, California, of all places, that we buy lots of shows for, and we're doing a lot of country there, but we're starting to do a lot more contemporary stuff. We've got My Chemical Romance. We've got Ice Cube playing there this weekend. Darius Rucker. We've got Merle Haggard. So all these things kind of put us in place so that it gives us a reason to be in a constant dialogue with talent agents. So we have a very good understanding of, you know, which agents represent which artists, and when we need answers from, you know, Rod Stewart, we know where to go to get those answers. When we need answers on REO Speedwagon, we know where to go. That's kind of what we do in the long, not 30-second version. What else? Give me an idea.
Well, that's great. I think that by now you guys should be starting to see the way you kind of can nose your way down a career path from knowing what you're passionate about. I mean, can you speak a little bit about where your passions were when you were on the on the university concert board, for instance? Which, by the way, you know, I mean, we've talked about this before. If you guys are interested in the live end, you know, it's not just being a part of the production EU. Be on the UPB here. You know, put on shows. Understand what it's like to buy a show, to have to deal with an artist, to deal with it end to end. I mean, you can see how it gives you a sort of a taste of what it's like, and you can know if that's where your passions will lead you. Can you speak a little bit about where your passions were?
I always loved live music. I always loved, you know what, I was never a great musician. I was never that disciplined. I can remember taking piano lessons for years, and I was very proud of the fact that after years of piano lessons, I could still never read music. I kind of BS my way through a couple recitals, And in fact, in college, I took a music class. I thought, this is stupid. I have to learn how to read music. And I think I finally got a C in a music class in college, and that was about as far as I was going to go. But I love being around bands. I love being around musicians. I had lots of friends that were musicians. So even in high school, I was the kid that booked bands at other high schools. In college, I definitely had an affinity for live shows. And when you're on the program committee, you're the guy that, helps put the stage up, helps make sure you pick up the band at the airport, and you do all those things, and you learn from all of it. And I've had plenty of experiences doing things small. They haven't just all been arena-sized, Coliseum-sized shows. I've definitely, had those experiences, and it's a lot harder because you have to learn a little bit more about all those different jobs. So it's a great experience. But yeah, I've always been drawn to the live side. Even today, when I hear an album and I know that there's a live version of the album, I'll always go to the live version of the album, just because I like that feeling of what happens when an act steps on stage and a crowd buys tickets to something you worked on.
That's what I want you guys to identify for yourselves, like where your passion actually crystallizes. Like for Mr. Apregan, he's talking about like the moment where a band is interpreting music, that even though it's been recorded, there's that moment. So I would imagine that if you were going to drop a pin on it, that's where the magic is for him. Know where it is for you, because the niche that you'll create for yourself, one way or the other, is going to be centered somewhere around that pin. I also found it interesting and relevant to these guys that, you were very pragmatic about it, the way you were going to enter the business. You were going mailroom, messenger. You saw your mailroom, messenger, assistant, agent as your likely path. Okay, so you had your path charted, but you were thrown a wrench, right? Something was thrown in the works. You didn't end up getting the mailroom gig you thought you were going to get. What did he do? He adapted and took what is an unglamorous, kind of thankless job in accounts, right? It was you were ready to do whatever it took.
Oh, yeah.
To get in and to be in there, and you were able to understand the association of business to the glamour positions.
Right.
So many of you. I mean, I've talked about this in the past. A lot of the way that everybody got into the record business, during the glory days, was to take a radio plugging job or a street team job, college rep job, something thankless and anonymous and unglamorous that would teach you, what it was like, what it was really like, and where the positions really were, and what other people did. You glean this strange skill set just by being in it, by doing something, by being a soldier or what, at that level. And it helped you, I think, to sort of, again, nose your way into where the real meaning was for you.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're right. And the other thing is you never know when you're going to meet somebody. I mean, it is a young business that turns over a lot, and a lot of it is, yes, finding the opportunity, and then a lot of it is really just people skills too, right? Just developing relationships and connecting with people, and staying in touch with people, and staying up to date with what's going on, even if it's at this stage, you're starting out, you don't really know who's who or who does what or who represents who or any of that kind of stuff, but there's so much more information available that you can just get for free off the internet. Get that kind of education so you start to get an understanding of who represents which acts, and somehow with all this you will start to formulate an idea on maybe where you want to put your attention. So many of these, there's so many different roles, I've always gravitated towards live in, that's where my interest has been. And the way that the industry is changing, it's turned out to not be such a bad place. I mean, business is tough everywhere. I mean, you've all heard about the record business and how that's dramatically changed, and radio's dramatically changed. And for a lot of the artists, I mean, going out on the road is really an important, it's always been an important marketing tool. That's critical if you're a developing artist. If you're an older artist, it's still an important way to get in front of your fans, because, if you are Neil Diamond, for example, chances are your next album isn't really going to find any airplay on radio anywhere. So how do you connect with your fans? You've got to get out on the road, and you got to go see them. If you're a classic rock guy that has 2 surviving members and a bunch of younger guys, it's just a money scoop, because maybe you're on your 4th wife and you've burned through all this money, and acts tour for different reasons. You know, in the beginning, you know, you're developing, you're starting a career, you're trying to create some kind of buzz, and you're trying to create a story and a following. You know, there are artists that, you know, maybe older artists that don't want to work quite as much, but they know they want to work a certain number of days a year. There are artists that do corporate stuff where, you know, I mean, I don't even know if you know these names, but like a Huey Lewis in the News or a Hall & Oates, right? I mean, those guys will do corporate stuff and they'll jump on a plane, they'll go to Hawaii. The Beach Boys probably play in Hawaii 10, 12 times a year, and no one even knows they're there. They're flying there, they're doing a show in a hotel ballroom for a group of insurance executives or whatever it happens to be, and they make a great living doing it. And, you know, for these artists that have been around for a long time, it really is a business. You know, they've got overhead. They know that they want to gross a certain amount of money every year, and they all approach it differently. The Nashville acts tour in a totally different way. I mean, you know, everyone in Nashville calls it, you know, weekend warrior. If you go to Nashville on a Monday or Tuesday, you'll see tour buses scattered all over town. It's because they're back from the weekend. But, you know, Wednesday night they're going out so they can play somewhere Thursday, Friday, Saturday, maybe Sunday, come back home. And, you know, for those guys, you can literally play half of America a weekend at a time. You know, Martina McBride is, I'm off on a tangent, but Martina McBride is a devoted mother. I don't know if you know who Martina McBride is or not, big country star. She doesn't want to be away from home. She wants to be home to take her daughter to school on Monday morning. So if that means they're playing somewhere Sunday night, it better be close enough for the bus to be there before it's time for school on Monday. So really, you can play half the country that way. That means if you play the other half of the country, now you can really just do, in 3 weeks, you can cover the rest of America. So all these different strategies on how you tour, it really depends on what the act wants to do and what the parameters are. I don't think I'm even answering, I don't even think I'm even addressing what you're talking about, Billy, I'm sorry.
I think you've done well. I think the other thing that struck me in your conversation, first of all, does anybody have a question, a pressing question they want to ask right now? I don't mean to take all of it. Yes.
I was just wondering if you could be a little more specific. Like, what do you mean when you say that you can consult, like with venues, how you do consult?
Yeah, I'll restate the question for the sake of the microphone. So, he wants to know what you mean when you say you consult with venues with regard to what, buying talent or putting on, acting as promoters?
Just pretty much everything you do. Well,
Sure.
everything.
It really depends on that venue's needs. I mean, typically these venues are in a kind of a competitive environment where there's another venue that they compete for. So,
Maybe if you don't mind, would you state it as the problem that they have and then how you help them solve that problem?
okay, here's a specific problem or opportunity. An arena somewhere in Illinois is having a 5-year anniversary, and the city fathers want to do something special. So, you know, booking X, Y, and Z isn't big enough. They want to spend a little extra money. They want Elton John. They only want Elton John. We'll go after Elton John, and maybe we'll get him, maybe we won't. That's one specific type of example. It's really not a very typical example. More often, we're helping a building fight for a show, and that might mean that we're calling the promoter, we're calling the agent. Here's another good example.
Can I break it down for them a little bit?
Yeah.
So how does first of all, how does that city in Illinois reach out to you? How do they find out about you? How do they know?
Well, in the case of the venue, we have a group of venues, they're actually members. They actually sign a contract with us every year to be members of our group. So we're talking to them all the time. We're on conference calls with them. We're meeting with them when we have opportunities to meet face to face to understand their needs and their market.
So if you're a big venue, your problem, one of your problems is that you have, you know, you want to fill up from time to time, right? You want to create revenue, and so you'll associate, you know, with Jeff's company, right? And you'll do conference calls to hear about what's going on, right? As part of the network. But you know, you'll be tuned into this already, right? That's not.
Yeah.
That's not. Yeah. So the issue there is that then you know, all these venues are in the same position, right? So they're basically competing.
Well, they're all
for
our
available
the
data.
venues in our group are in the same position with other people, not with other members of our group.
Right.
Right.
So they ended up having to. The issue is that then, you know, we talk about like an artist's avails, right? That's basically published information, right? They know that there's an artist or if they know there's an artist they want, and they're trying to book that artist, then they need help getting that done. How many of you have this vague idea of putting on a festival. You don't know you don't know how to get who you want to get. Well, this is the kind of help you need in that instance.
I don't know if did I answer your question?
Is that right? Yeah. Are you okay, Nick?
Yeah. I mean, the venues have different needs, and sometimes I will tell you, sometimes they have trouble. Another example might be a venue who's having difficulty with a promoter, okay? And the promoter saying, in the negotiation of their deal. So in that instance, it's not even a show that we're booking, it's a show that we're just really advising them on how to cut the deal with this promoter. And the business has become very, very transparent. So as the economy's gotten tougher, as the business has changed, as it's become more corporate, and as margins have gotten thinner, everybody has this tendency of counting everybody else's money, right? So the person in the equation that has the greatest amount of leverage, which is almost always the act, can drive tough deals. If you're the Eagles, you can drive a deal that REO Speedwagon cannot, because you're the Eagles, okay? So what's happened is, you all know what a concert promoter does. A concert promoter is the guy who goes to the venue, he rents the venue, he's responsible for all the expenses, including the artist, and he's hoping he's going to sell enough money to pay the artist, pay his bills, and put some money back in his pocket. In its simplest form, that's what the promoter does.
The timing is good. Our last class was actually about promoters and promotion, concert promotion. We talked about promoters assuming all the risk.
Right.
They're gambling. Every time they buy a show, they're gambling.
That's right. That's right. And it is just like gambling, because you can make money. Making money tonight has nothing to do with what happens tomorrow night. And there are certain acts that are universally hot everywhere, but there are other acts that aren't. There are other acts that are hot in this market, and you hope they're right in your market too. But I lost track. What I was going to say about promoters is that the margins are very thin. The risk is very, very high, and the margins are very, very thin. And I remember in the mid '80s, I was settling lots of concerts in LA, and we would sell out shows at the Forum. And when we ended up, and the acts get a guarantee typically, but they also get a percentage, whichever's greater. So the act is guaranteed money, the manager makes money off of the act, the agent makes money off the act, the promoter's the last guy in the food chain to make money, and he's the guy, the record label sells product. The promoter's the last guy in the food chain to make money, and he's the guy putting up all the risk. So it is, and it's a very low margin. So, what's happened historically is the concert promoter said, wait a minute, I'm the guy taking all the risk. I don't get any of the money from the beer. I don't get any of the money for the popcorn. I'm going to go build my own venues. And that's why we have all these amphitheaters in the country, because that really came out of promoters wanting to have some financial participation from all those revenue streams.
Concessions.
Right. So getting back to what I was talking about deals, though, the deals are very transparent, because when you cut a special deal for Elton John in your building, guess what? The agents that represent Elton John, now they know the deal in your building. And when they come back with Jimmy Buffett or anybody else, they expect that same deal. So you've got to be very careful when you negotiate deals and how you do it. So negotiating a deal with a promoter might be more complicated for some of those kinds of reasons. That's just another example of the kind of issues that our buildings deal with.
So your business is bringing expertise and information. Essentially, you vend intellectual capital. You bring information.
Sounds better when you say it. That sounds good. I'm going to use that. Yeah.
I'll start writing taglines for you.
Yeah.
I'd like to go back to your Concerts West experience.
Uh-huh.
Right? You created Concerts West created a role for themselves.
Right.
Which I found interesting, because that's an example of something besides passion that I consider to be indispensable. Which is innovation. Right. There was an opportunity they saw to combine promotion with management, and they pursued that and did so quite successfully for
Right.
years and
Yeah,
years.
very successful.
Can you speak a little bit about the role, about the need to innovate and to be able to think on your feet like that? Pivot when necessary in business.
Yeah, I think generally, and I'm a guy. I've done a lot of stuff, but I really do operate a small business. I mean, we've got a small operation with 6 people, and I think for us, I've really found, and I see examples every year about how good it is to be small, and what a great opportunity it is to be small, to be nimble, to be able to make decisions quickly and move quickly. you know, the big, and I'm really speaking about the concert promotion companies. I mean, Live Nation is a big, big company that does globally probably 25,000 shows a year around the world. And I don't even know how many employees they have, but they've got an enormous overhead. And you know, they don't have the luxury of operating on a small margin. They got to be swinging for the fences, you know. Flip side is, you know, we don't need to do that. And you know, our business is different also because we don't put ourselves in at-risk situations. We're not going to, financial risk situations, we're not going to do that. But yeah, I think the greatest amount of flexibility and being able to move quickly and make decisions quickly and not be burdened with, you know, committees and boards, I love that. I've always enjoyed being in smaller operations, so it affords you the luxury to make decisions on the fly when you need to. You know, if you're promoting a show and it's your own money on the line and it's not going well, wait and see how creative you get. You'll be dreaming up stuff that you never imagined out of necessity because you don't want to lose a small fortune.
Can you think of an example of some time that you had to invent on the fly, where one example where it worked wonderfully well and you learned from that experience, you know, used it again,
right? And
another example where it just killed you?
Yeah, I'm thinking of one of the latter, and it reminds me of New Orleans. We had a tour. I think we were scheduled to play New Orleans and Biloxi about. I don't know where, it was on the same tour. We had started the tour and that's when Katrina hit. And we were on the road and I think we had about 5 weeks. And so I had a hole in the tour, which means I have 100 people on the road sitting in hotels, costing a lot of money, and I had to find a place for them to go. And we did scramble, and we ended up, you know, part of it was an insurance issue too, and in terms of, you know, whether our cancellation insurance would cover the loss of 2 shows, and part of it was just trying to get answers. We couldn't find anyone on the ground to talk to us in Biloxi. The guy was just, you know, it was just a terrible situation for everybody. And yeah, we did fill a hole, and we did it on a 5-week promotion, and we did badly. Yeah. In another city. We diverted to another city, and it was out of necessity. We had to play the show. It just wasn't the typical kind of setup I would have for a tour. I mean,
you understand what he's saying, right? He had only 5 weeks to promote the show. That's not very much time for shows of that size.
Yeah.
You understand that, right? Sometimes you want 3 months. You know, it can be. Just suffice to say, you need considerably more time than 5 weeks, right? Can you imagine all the things that have to happen? You know, kinds of advertising, promotional campaigns, marketing plans that have to be executed.
Yeah, so that comes to mind.
What was something you had to invent on the fly that worked wonderfully well that you ended up using thereafter?
You know what? I'm trying to think of a good example for you on the fly, and nothing's really coming to mind. I mean, you're throwing a lot of situations. I mean,
how'd you get involved in new media? I mean, do you start using the internet? Were you an early or late adopter to like the internet, and did that start to roll efficiencies into your operation that you found useful?
It definitely has now. I mean, using Neil Diamond as an example, I mean, Neil Diamond is pretty much a constant. I mean, it's a much older demo. So, you know, you would think that it's a demo that's not that computer savvy. And I can remember, and the thing about Neil is he'll tour and then 3 years go by and then he'll tour again. So, you know, the whole internet world, the whole social networking world, all that in a 3-year period of time. I mean, you guys know more than anybody how much that world can change in such a short period of time. And, you know, I definitely saw a trending of how people were buying tickets and how many people were, you know, not bothering to go to a ticket outlet. Even though they were older demo, there were still, you know, higher and higher and higher percentages. Now, you know, with social networking, particularly with younger demo shows, I mean, it is, if you can develop your database, I mean, it is the absolute most cost-efficient way of marketing your shows, because you can reach a lot of people who are already hopefully fans or maybe critical decision makers or influencers that can help get the word out about you after your show. So yeah, managing your database, mining your database is critical now. We have a theater I was mentioning in Bakersfield that we book, and traditionally this theater's done lots of country, they've done some urban stuff, and they've done classic rock, but they really haven't done a lot of young shows, and they've really just stepped up and put a big investment in their website, and God, it's made a huge difference. And we're starting to book some younger shows, so it's going to take time to really develop that website for the younger set. We put My Chemical Romance on sale, shows into May. and we put it on sale a couple months ago, and this was the band going out and wanting to do underplays. So they wanted to do smaller venues, they wanted to just blow them out. We put the show up and it didn't blow out. And what it told me was that the database that we had is just too old. So it is critical. And as we book younger shows, as we collect that data, it's going to make a lot more efficient way of marketing. I mean, you know, some of the big festivals, you know, Coachella is a great example. I mean, you know, they have such an enormous database and such a branded event that people want to go to the show even if they don't necessarily know who's on the bill, which is what you hope to develop over the course of time if you're really making that investment in developing a festival. But that show went out almost immediately, and it was ticket giveaways, and I don't think they spent a lot of money in hard advertising. I think it was all you know, almost entirely social media.
Right. Yes.
When you're talking about tour routing and negotiations and venues, it seems like it's mostly in regard to bands that are pretty popular already. I was wondering if you had advice for like new bands who are looking to book shows out of town and how you go about negotiating with venues.
You know, it's a really good question, and truthfully, I haven't had experience doing stuff at the club level for a long, long time. I do have an artist that I manage that does play clubs, but we do have an agent. And he also does fairs and casinos and, you know, support gigs on bigger tours. You know, the tough thing, and I don't know what it's like out here in the club scene. You know, I know a big thing in LA was always pay to play, where the bands basically got stuck with a bunch of tickets they had to go sell, and that's kind of how they end up getting paid. You know, the tough thing is that, you know, it's hard to engage an agent to book you because he's going to get a percentage of almost nothing. So how do you get a guy that's really on board, that's going to be motivated, that cares about you, that wants to do it? Maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a cousin, maybe it's a girlfriend, maybe it's someone inside your inner circle that can help you with that. I don't really know what the club deals are like. I don't know if they're paying money. Typically, tell me, what's it like? Are they paying anything, or are you just lucky if you get? This depends. A lot of you guys are in bands?
In Cleveland, they still do pay to play at like pretty much every club in Cleveland, and it kills the music scene there.
Right.
And then they won't pay you like at the end of the show.
Then they won't pay you at the end of the show.
You sell tickets. And
Yeah.
Well, I think there are probably lessons from Jeff's talk that will extend to you. How important it is for you to develop an email database. How important it is for you to continually be doing, you know, creating activities that bring in that email. You have a Bandcamp page, put up music in exchange for email. It's easy for somebody to drop their email in that form, or, you know, grab an email for content widget from somebody like Catch Music or Topspin, where you guys can start to build a database. That email data, I know that you guys are at this age where email is marginalized for you because of texting and Facebook, but the fact of the matter is that email is, as a business tool, is invaluable. And, you know, Jeff sees shows succeed and fail based on email databases, you know, or perform or not, or underperform based on email databases. This is the world you're in, and from day one, data is king. From the minute you play your first club gig, be collecting email data, because it's how you can offer new music. It's how you can put a buy link to a ticket, you know, to a ticket site, or to an Eventbrite database, or to whatever you need to do to be able to generate that stuff. And I think that some of those larger lessons that you're talking about are certainly translatable to the lower level.
Yeah, and you know, on the club level, I know it's tough because there's probably not an incentive to, you know, in a larger situation where you're selling tickets in an arena or a larger venue, you've got, you know, Ticketmaster has that database of all the purchaser data. You don't have that luxury in a smaller venue, and you've got to figure out how to incentivize people to give you that email address. I think that's what Billy's saying.
Lionel, you have a question?
Yeah. Pretty much it kind of goes toward guy in blue shirt. I'm like, no, I'm sorry. But like a lot of times, if you want to like book like say clubs and things like that, it pretty much will basically be about your popularity. Like, will you draw attention to the club? Like, by you performing at that club, will you put them on the map? So pretty much, if you're like a new artist, you don't really want to be worrying about clubs right now. You want to worry about radio play, YouTube plays. You know, how many times am I getting visited on the site per day? Or, you know, how many times am I getting, you know, this many comments on my song a day? You know, like averages, things like that. When you get your popularity to where you want it to be, then when you actually start trying to do negotiations with clubs, they're not going to be trying to screw you over. You know,
Right.
pretty much you're doing them a favor when you come and perform for their club. So you don't really have to worry about that. Like,
Well, Lionel making an interesting point about what we might consider the new school report card, where the old school report card might have been record sales or record shipped,
Right.
spins on the radio, BDS spins on a weekly basis, press, articles running in the press. Now we have things like number of emails in your database, Facebook friends,
Yeah.
YouTube plays,
Smart.
all these other things that you can influence as an independent artist. You can, and I think that what we're talking about here is a need to bring your business bring your profile up to some kind of critical mass, where you do then mean enough to involve an agent or to be rewarding for a promoter to take a risk on, where you can demonstrate some performance threshold. Does it make sense to you?
How many of you guys are in bands?
In
Are
bands,
in
how many
bands.
Performers.
Got it.
So there's another question. Nick, you have another question?
Yeah.
Hold on for the mic.
When you're negotiating like bigger deals, what's one of the most common disputes that you get between the venue and the promoter and the artist?
I mean, you're almost always trying to get the right financial deal in terms of what the act is looking for. There's certain acts that there's certain acts that are a lot more conscientious about their ticket prices. So, I mean, that really does affect the deal. I mean, the venue has a capacity of X, and there are all these different factors. I mean, if you envision an arena, the size of the production will impact how many seats you can sell, right? Because if you're in an arena and you can play 180 degrees, that's one thing. If you're in an arena and you can go 360, that's going to give you a lot more seats. So the capacity of the venue, the ticket prices, and then of course all the venue expenses typically drive the deal. What happens a lot of times though, the agents will call and they'll say, so-and-so is working, they're available on this night, we want your building, we want X amount of money. And then you put together all the numbers and you realize, well, okay, I can do that, but if I want to break even at this level, that means my ticket prices need to be too high. I don't think that's the right thing to do on a Tuesday night in Biloxi, making this up. So usually you're going back and forth on financial terms. Now, once you iron all that out, depending on the stature of the act, then there's a lot of different things that the act is demanding, right? One is the production rider, which is if they're not carrying their own sound lights, all the different types of equipment they need. But there might be other things. I mean, they might have a tour sponsor, for example. That means that, we need to put Corona beer on the ticket. And we need to hold a certain number of tickets for sponsors or for a special meet and greet. In other words, a lot of times the acts have certain things that they've cut their own deals that the promoter's really responsible for helping fulfill those obligations. So, in a best case scenario, all that's discussed ahead of time so you know what you're getting into. But, sometimes we book shows sometimes where we haven't even seen the writer. And then we get the writer and there's all this kind of stuff that we got to go back and forth on just to try to renegotiate. Because all those things cost money and they're going to affect the promoter's ability to walk out with any money. So, but almost always the negotiations have to do with something that affects money. Sometimes the acts the management for the acts will have a very specific idea on the radio stations they want you to go to. Sometimes they will not, for example, want you to go to one station and give them a presents because it might offend the other station. And if they're trying to get airplay on two different stations, that's a conflict for them. So they want you to be working with both stations. And when I say working with as a promoter, that means I'm going to go to station Y and spend $2,000. I'm going to go to station Q and spend $2,000.
Is there any of those like financial issues that, like any of those financial things that come into dispute are like, as the industry is evolving, do you see any trends coming up with like certain deals, like you were saying, sponsors on the tickets, like that kind of thing? Are there any things like that that are like more significant than they used to be?
That's a really good question. Tour sponsorship really came about at a time, it really flourished at a time when record labels used to help bands go on the road. They used to give them tour support, get them on the road. That's how you made friends with radio. That's how you sold tickets, is getting in front of audiences. the record label started pulling back on that, and that's when acts started going towards corporate sponsorship. I think, I don't know that there's necessarily more corporate sponsorship than there has been in the past. I think there's a greater acceptance of it. I know there's a culture that makes it very uncool to have corporate sponsors, so you need to be smart about how you do it. But I think enough sponsors have sponsored different types of tours that there's a greater sensitivity. I mean, in other words, you're not going to, you're not going to see sponsor signage on the stage ever, almost ever, right? That's pretty consistent for every single act. Not in front of the stage, not behind the stage. Now, you go to a Kenny Chesney concert in the stadium, you'll see some big Corona scrims, and they pay Kenny a lot of money for that. So, I don't know if there's more of it or not. I think the sponsors have gotten more sophisticated in terms of evaluating their investment to make sure, at the end of the day, they got to sell Corona beer. They got to sell a lot of it, and they got to feel like their investment with Kenny, for example, is the right thing for them to do. But I think people are, this is a little bit of a sponsor tangent, but I think people are looking at sponsorship very differently than they have before, really out of necessity. I was reading an article a few weeks back about the last OK Go video that they did. I don't know if you guys saw it. Some of you, OK Go, are any of you familiar with that band? Right. So I couldn't name one song, but I can tell you about their videos. And I think they rented a warehouse out in Burbank, California, and they spent like $160,000 doing that video. And I heard that all the money came from State Farm Insurance. I don't know, I don't even get that, right? I not only don't get it, and at the same time, they maintain complete creative control, and I don't think you'll see a State Farm logo anywhere. So somehow State Farm figured out a way to be associated with this video and get cool points with consumers. I don't really know if that was a good payoff for them or not, but people are looking at deals in a very creative way.
Okay, good?
Yeah.
All right, well, Stan, we might have time for one quick question. We're basically out of time. Do you have a quick comment?
Yeah, just because I'm curious, like, I only recently heard about the filming concerts in 3D that they've been doing from a friend of mine who's playing on Warped Tour, and he said they're filming it in 3D, and I was like, is there really any money in that? I can't see that doing a lot.
It's, you know what, I can only speak from my experience in 2009. The cost of doing it is unbelievable. It takes 3 guys to operate one camera, right? 3 guys to operate one camera, and we had 16 cameras scattered across 2 stages. And you know what, I think it's just trying to grab the content, trying to control the content. And as it becomes more prevalent, I think the guys that have that in their library, I think, could be in a good position for a couple of years until everyone has the content, until they figure out how to do it less expensively. So,
I mean, is there a demand for it?
I think it's very limited. I mean, they've done some limited release stuff in movie theaters, and the Justin Biebers and the Miley Cyruses have been monster, but even the U2 video was a disaster. They lost a fortune on that.
All right, so more of Jeff at Forum this evening, but join me in thanking him for coming to class.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.